There's a moment in everyone's manifestation journey when something clicks, not because the world suddenly gives in, not because the specific person finally calls back, but because a quiet voice within whispers, "I was never meant to chase." That one realization is more powerful than 1,000 visualizations. Because here's the truth, when one chases, it's not love that's being pursued. It's validation. And love was never meant to feel like running after something that keeps moving further away. The teachings of Neville Goddard reveal something radical and liberating, that you are the operant power, the cause, not the effect. Which means you don't chase what's already yours. You don't run after love when love originates within. Chasing someone, energetically or physically, is rooted in the illusion that they hold something you don't. That their attention, their affection, their presence will complete something inside. But nothing and no one can complete what is already whole. This is not about denying the desire. It's about realizing that desire isn't fulfilled by controlling the outer world. It's fulfilled by becoming the version of self that no longer needs to grasp. Letting go is not defeat. It's not giving up. Letting go is the quiet confidence of someone who finally knows who they are. And that confidence, that energy, is what draws everything in, not because it demands, but because it doesn't need to. Magnetism doesn't scream. It doesn't plead. It doesn't text paragraphs trying to convince someone of its worth. It just is. Magnetism is being so anchored in self, so certain in inner knowing, that others can't help but feel it. Neville taught, change your conception of yourself and you will automatically change the world in which you live. And that shift, from needing them to choosing you, changes everything. Not just on a spiritual level, but in the energy you carry. Imagine walking into a room not trying to be noticed, and yet every head turns. Why? Because there's something unshakable in your presence. That's what silent confidence feels like. It's not loud, but it's undeniable. And when it comes to manifesting a specific person, that kind of energy is magnetic beyond words. The paradox is this: the more one tries to control, chase, or manipulate the 3D, the more resistance is created. The specific person pulls away, not because they don't care, but because energetically, the fear of loss is louder than the love. But when someone detaches, not from the desire, but from the need, the story shifts. Suddenly, they feel different in the mind's eye. They feel like a choice, not a lifeline. They become part of a life already rich, already beautiful, not a missing puzzle piece. And from that space, they show up, not because they were chased, but because they were allowed to come. There's a story playing out behind every chase, a quiet panic that says, if I let go, they'll forget me. If I stop trying, they'll never come back. It's a story rooted in wounds, in memories of being left behind, of not being chosen. And that story feels so convincing in the middle of the night when silence fills the phone. But it's not the truth. The truth is, love doesn't need force to exist. Connection doesn't need proof every hour to stay real. And if someone is truly meant to be in one's life, they don't need to be chased to stay. The desire to chase often comes from forgetting the original power, forgetting that all creation begins within. Neville said, to be conscious of being is to be alive. Which means, the moment someone becomes conscious of being loved, chosen, wanted, the outer world begins to mirror that belief. But that shift can't happen while energy is tied to checking, begging, or performing. This is not a judgment. It's compassion. Because chasing isn't weakness, it's exhaustion from trying too hard to be enough in someone else's eyes. But what if there was nothing to prove? What if love could come, not through effort, but through ease? The mind may resist that idea at first, but the soul knows. Chasing isn't what brings love. Being is. Stillness can feel unbearable at first, especially when the heart is restless, the thoughts are loud, and the mind keeps asking, what if they forget me? But stillness is not emptiness. Stillness is presence. And in that presence, everything is revealed, including the patterns that keep one stuck. The need to chase often arises because silence feels like rejection. No response feels like abandonment. But what if silence wasn't absence, but space? Space for clarity, space for self, space to feel what's been avoided, not to suffer, but to heal. Neville often emphasized imagining from the end, not towards it. And that end is peace. That end is union. That end is confidence, not desperation. Stillness allows the imagination to breathe, to rebuild. It's where the most powerful shifts take place, not when affirmations are shouted, but when truth is felt. I no longer need to chase, because what's mine finds me. Always. That's not just a phrase. That's a frequency, and it's one that cannot be faked. It has to be embodied. But once it's lived, even for a moment, something changes. A timeline collapses. A fear dissolves. The mirror of reality bends. Not because someone was chased, but because someone returned home to self. That's what stillness gives, not punishment, but the path back to power. The most magnetic version of you doesn't beg, chase, or perform. This version doesn't need a reply to feel worthy. Doesn't need a like, a call, or a good morning text to feel chosen. This version already knows, already lives, from the knowing that love is not earned through effort. It's reflected through belief. And belief doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't check the 3D for signs of approval. Neville's message was never about obsessively waiting. It was about assuming, occupying the state, dwelling in the wish fulfilled. And in that fulfilled state, there is no chasing, because everything has already arrived. There's a softness to that power. Not aggressive, not needy, not defensive, just calm, centered truth. The specific person is not a god, not a savior, just a reflection. And if the reflection is pulling away, it's not rejection. It's a mirror asking, are you choosing you yet? The moment one chooses self, everything starts to orbit around that decision. Not instantly, not always visibly, but energetically, things shift. The magnet becomes stronger. The signal becomes clearer. The version of self that no longer chases becomes the version that receives. And in that receiving state, even silence becomes a sign, not of lack, but of alignment. Rejection is one of the deepest fears in manifestation. But what if rejection was never personal? What if it was simply the outer world responding to an inner narrative that says, I'm not enough unless they choose me? That's not truth. That's programming. And it can be reprogrammed. Not by begging, not by scripting obsessively, but by rewriting the belief beneath the need. Neville taught that everyone is yourself pushed out. Which means what appears as rejection is really a feedback loop, a mirror. And it's not to blame, it's to show where love has yet to be given internally. Rejection hurts most when someone believes it means something about them, that they're unlovable, unworthy, but none of that is real. What's real is this: when someone stops chasing and starts believing, the mirror changes. The one who once ran begins to return, not because of reverse psychology, but because energy has shifted. And that shift wasn't about proving anything to them, it was about remembering the truth. You never needed to be chosen to be whole. You were always whole. Rejection isn't the end. It's the beginning of reclamation, of self, of power, of peace. All along, the power was never in their hands, never in their replies, never in their actions. It was always within. That's the foundation of Neville's teachings. The world is yourself pushed out, which means it's not about changing them. It's about returning to you. When someone understands this deeply, chasing becomes irrelevant. Not because desire disappears, but because identity evolves. The new identity doesn't grasp. It radiates. It doesn't seek permission. It moves in truth. And in that movement, life begins to respond in ways that feel miraculous, but they're not miracles. They're mirrors. The specific person who once felt distant, they respond to the new state. The one who was silent, they feel the shift. But none of that is the goal anymore. The goal becomes peace, fulfillment, embodiment. And from that state, everything is added. Not because it's needed, but because it's a match. That's the beauty of not chasing. It opens the space for receiving. And receiving is your natural state. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean pretending not to care. It means surrendering the need to control. It means allowing the universe to do what it does best, reflect what's within. Letting go is the boldest declaration of belief. It's saying, I trust. I know. I already have it. That energy is rare. But when it's real, it moves mountains. The specific person is not separate. Not distant, just part of a play already written. And you are the writer. The moment you stop trying to edit the ending and start living from the fulfilled story, life responds. So take a breath. Feel what's true. Not the noise, not the fear, but the truth that's always been waiting beneath the chase. You were never meant to beg for love. You were meant to be love. The kind that doesn't chase. The kind that doesn't panic. The kind that sits in silence and still knows, I am chosen. I am wanted. I am already it. And if you want to understand why they've gone quiet, why things seem delayed, that goes deeper. But it always comes back to this: the moment you return to you, they do too. Tell me below, what part of you are you finally ready to stop chasing from? Your worth, their attention, love. Let's talk about it in the comments. This is a safe space for you to come back to your power. I will meet you with another video. Happy manifesting.